kind of go to our real witness. It kind of appeared out here.
Joel's house. Hey, thanks for Sam's got Joel's. Sorry. Thanks for the order.
Most we're talking about is the reg mechanism. This is Chapter 1-3. Weather service engineers is
We're just today, we were playing with and they had triple play.
Oh, really?
Triple play with the Giants over there. How much you care.
Spring, spring training.
They don't, means nothing.
Okay, it's 5:45. We'll call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being here tonight for our February 23rd, 2026 special board meeting. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart.
Here.
Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Dalkey.
Here.
Amber Kirsting.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf.
Here. And we have a quorum. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And our mission statement, the school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Onto the agenda order. Tonight we are going to, we have an action item to vote on the compensation plan for 2026-27. And we are also going to be discussing a preliminary budget estimate and long-term debt management. And I think it would be worthwhile to have those discussions before we vote on our compensation plan. Are there any objections to moving the whole action agenda to after those discussion items?
So to clarify, you want to take the entire discussion agenda, item 5, and just move it before item 4?
That's correct.
Okay. No objection here.
Okay, any objections? All right, then we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you. We have no recommendations or commendations tonight, but it is Public Schools Week. And since we are here all gathered together, I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I just wanted to read from the National Network for Public Education. Across America, nearly 50 million children walk through the doors of public schools every day. Public schools welcome every single child who comes to them. That open door is one of the most important commitments that we make as a society. I just want to thank all of our teachers, all of our staff, all of our community members, all of our board members, and everyone who makes public education possible in Menomonie. Next up, we have community communications. We've got one speaker tonight, Mike Denver.
Good evening. What an opportunity you have. Every teacher worth their salt every day strives for a teachable moment. Where you have them, the students are yours to learn what you are presenting. There are fewer, more gratifying times in a teaching career than those moments. This whole year is a teachable moment. To be alive when your country gets to celebrate 250 years, really? How special is that? Is it going to be another, it's going to be another 20 generations or so before this comes around again, if they're lucky. America is special and definitely worth celebrating. There are numerous venues that can be used. If you but ask, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who would consider it an honor to work with you to provide the students with thoughtful and insightful lessons on the birth and the history of our nation. Please do not let this opportunity pass you by. I am but a humble and grateful citizen who is still stirred by the national anthem, and thank God for the founders who gave themselves to birth this nation. I would be happy to volunteer to work with a committee to create a program in schools. Grab this teachable moment. Happy birthday, America. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have our consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Abe.
Second. Motion by Abe, second by Dominique. Tonight we have an action to approve our 6 through 12, grades 6 through 12 Chromebook refresh, and as was discussed at our last meeting, and an action to approve revisions to policy 342.2 in the Title I program, as was also discussed at our last meeting. I think we're looking at the same documents that we saw 2 weeks ago. Does anyone have questions or discussion related to either of these two items?
Last time we discussed kind of how it might play out in terms of the Chromebook contract. Can you, and we got the email, can you just give a really quick summary of kind of what played out as the best option?
Yeah, and actually I'll have Katie run through that real quick. And while she's getting ready, I'll just take a second to mention the Title I policy is as presented, except last time there was a suggestion to include a little description of Title I, so that was added. That's the only change to that policy.
Is that the first paragraph?
Yes.
Great.
For the Chromebook bids, the pricing came in pretty good because we were able to secure things that are currently in stock. So instead of buying the models that came out like this January, February, we're buying models that came out like last January, February. It still gives us a really long lifespan, but in buying what's in stock, it stabilized that pricing because they didn't have to go back out to the manufacturer. So when we look at all of our vendors too in their bids put a caveat in that we can't hold your pricing as long as your proposal requires. So we can only guarantee the pricing if we still have these in stock or for the shortened period of time. So by not doing the lease, we were also able to save additional funds because we could pick and choose between the vendors instead of like we had to take one proposal as written. So we were able to save $1 a license times 1,800, right? So we were able to award that to one vendor. The insurance that we currently use, though, work with any partner. So even if we don't buy the devices from them, we can do the insurance through them. That saved roughly $38,000. So we were able to save almost around $40,000 just by selecting between the vendors as well.
That's great. Thank you for your fast action and open-mindedness about how to pursue that. That's great.
That was going to say the same thing. Thank you for doing that work and for coming up with the best deal. Any other questions or discussion about either the Chromebook refresh or the Title I updates? All right, seeing none, let's vote. My motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have our personnel consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda.
Hines moves.
Amy, second.
So tonight we just have one resignation. Did you want to say anything about this? All right. Any questions or discussion about the resignation or the personnel consent agenda? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
Actually, I do have a question on between items.
Okay, you already voted. Okay.
I'm curious what does the market look like now for a position like that?
I mean, you're talking about, like music, and so, I haven't posted it, but I'm assuming that it'll be somewhat challenging to fill. But it's, it's also part of a bigger staffing, discussion, so, yeah.
But just to clarify, it's a resignation effective at the end of the school year, so, we will have plenty of opportunity.
And it's helpful to have that advance speak right there. Very much so. By the way, motion passes unanimously. No, it's okay. All right, so for our later discussion, we're moving on to our discussion items. And we're starting with discussion item A on the 2026-27 preliminary budget estimates.
Eric's gonna do the lion's share of this, and he's done the lion's share of the work, but before he talks, I wanna just mention a couple things, and I know the board is well aware of this, and we've talked about it at the board table several times, but this is really just the first initial estimate. There is a ton more that needs to happen. There's so much information that we don't know. Everything from our September enrollment next year to our state certified aid. And even though it's the second year of the biennium, we are hearing more and more that it's likely, or very possible, I should say, that there could be some changes in Madison that could impact our budget as well. We're still really hopeful that there'll be some sort of budget reconciliation. I have been in communication with our legislators, really trying to advocate for really two things. One is trying to get additional special education funding. We all know that kind of the promise that was given has come up quite short. So any additional special education funding would have a big impact on our budget because it is such a large line item. And then the other thing we're advocating for is additional tax relief for property taxes, since there was no new state aid put into the formula. So we know there's going to be a lot of changes. We think there'll be even more than normal because of the possible budget reconciliation. But with that, it's still important that we move forward with our planning. Eric's done a good job communicating with our principals, our staff. We still have our budget planning tool out there for staff members to provide ideas. And with that being noted, Eric, why don't you give us our first look at next year's budget?
Yeah, so I provided for the board the three reports and also a narrative to accompany those. So I'd just like to work through those. Again, this is for the 26-27 budget year. So the first form has in bold some assumptions, as you can see there. So no new funds were put into Fund 46 for this scenario. I had the special ed reimbursement at 39.5%. Again, that's quite a bit below the 45% that should be for that. Slightly decreased enrollment and staffing cast forward. So as you can see, the first column is a pay raise of 4.58%. Now what that is, the conversation of the board last time was that the steps and lanes would be given, and then it was an increase of 2.63%. So that actually works out to a 4.58% increase. And as you can see, that first column describes that, and then the pay raise of, more traditional pay raise of the 2.63% or CPI, that's the second column. So under the 2.63 increase, the projected operating deficit for 26-27 would be around over $67,000. Under the 4.58% increase, the operating deficit is approximately $628,568. So the difference between is $569.81, which is the 4.58% plan increasing the projected deficit by that amount just in the first year alone. So while both scenarios result in deficit spending, the higher compensation adjustment accelerates the drawdown of the fund balance. And as you can see there on the Baird model, which is the second page, you see the 26-27 and those amounts for deficit, and then you see those forecasted 4 years beyond that into the future. So under that trajectory, the district would likely have to see a referendum by November of 2028 or consider significant cost reductions in that scenario. You will also notice on that page that the mill rate drops significantly beginning in the 28-29 school year and then continues beyond that point. So this is due to long-term debt being paid down to a level where additional borrowing capacity could become available. So Brian is here as well from Baird, and he will talk further about that as well. The enrollment projections using this model assume a decline of approximately 0.5 to 2% annually over the next several years. As we've talked about, this is not an unusual thing for Menomonie, but it's a statewide trend. And this trend will continue to impact the district's revenue limit and the ability to generate additional revenue in the near term. So as Joe said, it's important to emphasize that these projections are highly preliminary. There's a lot of different scenarios that could materially impact the final budget, and those include course enrollment, special education reimbursement levels. There's talk of maybe a special session regarding that. Health insurance costs, costs of other benefits, and just inflationary pressures on just everything, just general inflation as well. So as additional information becomes available over the coming months, projections, I'll continue to refine and update these projections. And really the purpose of the forecast is to clearly outline the implications of each compensation scenario. So we can move further in, as we move further into making the 26-27 budget process.
If I could just add a couple more things, and then certainly we'll try to answer questions. One thing to consider is that typically our budget is relatively conservative in how it's put together. Our staff does a great job prioritizing needs over wants, and our staff does a great job coming in within budget. So typically at this time of the year, we see, bigger deficits, and oftentimes by the end of the year, it ends up being in the black. We can't guarantee that, but oftentimes that's what's happened over the past decade plus. I also want to point out that unlike some other years, there are some things in play. For instance, the fact that Downsville is no longer operating as an elementary school. Much of the budget impact was factored into this current year budget, but this is the first year of that, so there still are things that remain to be seen in terms of cost savings for utilities and other services that, we think we got them all, but until we get through the entire year, I think we'll have a much better idea of the actual impact after a year. I also want to mention that if you look at Eric's assumptions, and this is something we talk a lot about, what kind of assumptions do we want to put in the preliminary budget? And I guess my take on that is I don't really care a whole lot what the assumptions are, as long as they're detailed. Because we know things are going to change, like enrollment, like staffing levels, and as long as we know what this preliminary budget was made from, as we get further along, then we can make the proper adjustments. But one thing to really point out is that this figures a cast forward with our current staffing levels. And as we look at enrollment, and the board has done such a good job over the years, making sure that we have the resources, especially the human resources, to provide the services that are needed. But when we look at projecting our enrollment forward, knowing that there is a slight decline, especially at the elementary grade levels, I would anticipate that staffing levels will not be as high in 2026, 2027 as they are right now. Now, that doesn't mean we're looking at layoffs or things like that, but there might be some situations where we know we're going to have a number of retirements. We may not need to fill all those positions based on the staffing that's needed. So again, this is a preliminary estimate. I think it's probably conservative, and we will continue to keep the board updated. Really, the next time you get a real in-depth look at the budget would be in June, when we actually have the preliminary budget for the board to consider.
I have a couple questions. As I say that, I'm reminding myself and everyone else, please speak into your microphones, especially since you have someone listening on the phone. My first one is just sort of a clarification. You talked about the cast forward, sort of in the Baird model that we're looking at here, sort of indicating that with the higher compensation plan potentially needing a referendum as early as 2028. And I think what you're saying is the reason for that is after 2028, we would be looking at a fund 10 balance that would dip below that level for kind of cash flow, right?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that I understood that that's why you said that.
Yeah.
And then the second one is in the assumptions on the first page, you have an estimated increase in Fund 27 transfer in the gray box. second one up from the bottom. Can you say more about that?
So,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh,
I just
no,
noticed
that's-
this evening.
that's okay. So I believe, what was factored in there,
Is it increased from the last budget because of the decreased
yes,
reimbursement?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah, so it'd be an increase from the last budget,
got it.
correct?
So not necessarily an increase in our actual expenses,
But an increase in the
based on
budget
reimbursement.
amount. Yeah.
Okay, and again, that's one of the things that Dr. Zadowski just mentioned that could be potentially changing in the coming months.
Yes,
Yes, okay, thank you. Sorry that I put you on the spot.
that's okay.
All right, other questions or discussion?
So assumption 5 in the special ed reimbursement, obviously, as Joe alluded to, that is being, maybe discussed, sorry. That may be discussed in the legislature, we're not sure. So the number you have on there, is that your estimate of the status quo, how it might play out, or an estimate accounting for what we might, see in the wind of Madison?
Kind of more the status quo. I tried to be conservative with that, so again, I have no idea what Madison will hold, and so that was more of a status quo and just a projection. I mean, just based on this year, with it supposedly to be 42%, and then the early estimates was 35%, it's best to go conservative, I guess, with those.
Yeah, I guess my question is do you think 39.5 is conservative enough? If nothing changes.
The second year of the biennium is supposed to have another increase
Yeah.
at the
So
state level.
45%, I believe, so it would be a 39.5 down from what should be 45%.
Okay, all right, thanks for that reminder. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on the preliminary budget estimate? So this is something that I'm sure we'll be talking about in the meantime, but we will come back to this for a vote in June, is that correct?
Yeah, it'll be redone
Yeah.
by June, but this is really an estimate. It kind of goes estimate in February, preliminary budget in June, a budget for the annual meeting in August, and then the final budget for board approval in October.
Were you gonna say something? All right. Other questions or discussion? All right.
You guys want to show?
No, I'm good. I'm all clear.
Wonderful, thanks for that. All right, next up on our discussion item is the School District of Menomonie Area Long-Term Debt Management.
So Rachel, I'd like to introduce Brian Brewer, and I've had the pleasure to work with Brian, I think most of my 20 years as a superintendent in Wisconsin. Brian's been with Baird, and he serves a couple different roles, I believe. I don't know, it seems like you have a lot more clients now than you used to, but what I know is he's a foremost expert when it comes to long-term debt. We had a great opportunity to meet with Brian when we were down in Milwaukee for the State School Board Convention, and he has done a really nice job advising us how we can manage our long-term debt. And after some of the discussions, Eric and I just felt it was really important for the board to have an opportunity to hear from Brian, and then also for Brian to kind of share what the future looks like. We have a lot of opportunity here in Menomonie based on how the long-term debt has been handled. And from there, Brian, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. Yes, I've had the good fortune of working with the district for 20 plus years, and Joe, similar time period, but with Baird for 30 years. So I've been at this for a while. And I was just telling Eric, I was looking back, preparing for the deck you have in front of you, and some of the same concepts that we are talking about tonight, which is forward-looking by 3 to 4 years. I had exact similar decks from 2007, 2008, 2009, like kind of prepping for what's next, because that's really what this part of the conversation is about. As Joe mentioned, you've been actively managing the debt that was authorized at referendum back in 2013 by not only refinancing when rates moved to historical lows, but you've also been using the opportunities where the levy changed to levy to pay down the debt faster. So you're shortening that time period of when you're making your final debt payments, which then creates some opportunities or capacity within the tax levy for what's next. We don't really know exactly what's next. Eric showed that there might be a need down the road if the funding doesn't change, or let's say the funding does change, which then you can levy and collect, and then you can manage that with your debt payments that are stepping down because you've actively paid them down. So that's what this portion of the discussion is about, is kind of where are you? What are the kind of the next steps, and what would that lead you to in a couple of years in terms of capacity? So I did notice that it's in your deck, but my page numbers don't look great, so I'm going to walk through page by page so that it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 2, 2, 1, 3. So I wasn't focused on that part as much, but so the first page is the existing Fund 39. It has yellow highlight across the page. That is, this is the detailed schedules that Eric and I and my team and Joe talk about. The one thing I don't really want you to focus too much on the various numbers. I want you to focus on how low the interest rates are. And that is, again, because you actively sought opportunities to refinance and lower that original cost of debt back, over this repayment period. We're now, a decade plus, 12-ish years into it. And so you're nearing the final payment on that first issue. Your highest cost debt is in that second issue, in the blue and the pink type color, 3%. So that's your highest interest cost debt. If you flip to the next page, you'll see the most recent refinancing, which is in 2022. And those rates were 0.9 and 1, and your highest rate is a 1.97 there, which again was abnormally low because we're coming out of the pandemic. But you and the board at that time took advantage of the ability to lower your cost of debt. Ultimately, that leads over to the far right of that page, where your payments are leveled out at around 2.2 to 2.5 million. And then stepping down out to 2034. So if you flip to the next page, I referenced this, but this is kind of a table summary of the last 4 years of your debt prepayments and refinancings. So the table at the top shows the gross savings. That second column is about $1,350,000 of avoided interest costs, saved interest costs, because you've been paying down that debt and not incurring the long-term interest costs. The far right shows how your current balance is currently sitting at about $13.6 million outstanding to be repaid over the next 8 years. Right now you have a balance in Fund 39 of about $2.1 million, which each spring you have historically approved an action to make the transfer to pay down a portion. So I have an illustration of what that one would look like for this spring. And then at the bottom of that page, it shows the gross savings from prior debt refinancing. So during that time period, you've refinanced the debt, portions of the debt 3 different times, and that has avoided a total interest cost of $3.3 billion. So taking this slide, I don't want to leave it too quickly, but by the prepayments, you've avoided $1.3 million, and by the refinancings, you've avoided 3.3, so about $4.6 million of lower tax levy that would have gone to pay interest costs.
Brian, if I could just add something, and I probably could have done this in the introduction. When we just got to talking about the preliminary budget and how there's a lot of pressure on Fund 10. I think it's really important for the board and for everyone who might be watching or listening to understand, we're talking about long-term debt, which is totally separate. Even though our long-term debt situation is very, very good, it's in Fund 39, which is a special long-term debt fund. So unfortunately, we can't take these dollars and just move them into operations to pay for salaries or to add staff or whatever. It was referendum approved debt for capital maintenance. So even though this fund is really, really good, it really does nothing to help our operating fund. This is just more management of the tax levy.
That is correct. The levy to repay the principal and interest is authorized via a voter-approved referendum. And so that's why the savings that we just talked about cannot just be transferred over to the Fund 10. In order to do that, it would be a future ask of, can we increase Fund 10 as Fund 39 steps down? Which that would be the mechanism of moving it from one side to the other. But short of a future voter approval on something like that, this is just savings.
But another way to look at that is that, 15 years ago, money that would have been spent from Fund 10 was offset by that request to the taxpayers. And that's what we've been paying down since then. So in some sense, it offset Fund 10 over the last decade or so as maintenance that was able to be done through that request.
Because the project's paid for some of the maintenance costs? Is that okay? I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what you were saying, because the Fund 10 is calculated by the revenue limit every year on that per pupil, so it is what it is. And this repayment was...
The projects that were done could not, if they had been done otherwise, would have had to come out of some of their operating fund, right?
Correct, yes, that makes sense. Yes. So the next page is the title is 2026 prepayment plan. So this is a format you've likely seen before if you've been on the board. But the left side is that issue where I pointed out earlier that has your 3 maturities that have the highest interest cost, the blue section. So the plan for this spring would be to bring back to you for action using about 1.7 million of the 2.1 that's sitting there to prepay those 3 maturities from 2031 to 2033. In doing so, in the middle, you see the savings from defeasance. That 281,000 is what could be saved by prepaying that in this fiscal year. The additional benefit to that is that it becomes an aidable expense, and so next year's equalization aid would include the reimbursement on this expenditure.
Sorry, can you say that again? The amount that we prepay in the defeasance is an aidable expense?
Correct.
Okay.
And each of the years you've been doing this, that the same thing. So in your aid number for this year is what you put into that prepayment last spring in spring of 25.
Learn something new every day. Thanks.
So the thing I want you to watch is that far right column as we're going, because that's the from the second to left column to the second from the right to the far right, you'll see the change in the future payments by each of these steps each spring. So you'll see that right now this action is targeting 2031 through 2033, and so that those payments go from about 600,000 down to about 23,000. Okay. So if you just toggle to the next page and just look at that far right column again, now it's going from the 23,000 that I just talked about to 0 in those final 4 years, because what I'm doing is taking next year's budgeted figure, which again, as Joe and Eric both clearly said, budgeted because things will change, but we put a number in there just to show how it could look. In this case, we're using about $1.5 million, a little shy of $1.6 million. The savings by targeting this 2034 maturity is 182,000, which part of that is because that rate is lower, and so there's not as much to be saved. But ultimately, we're setting that, we're shortening the payments in that far right column so that we're kind of bringing it forward such that if you as a board face the next investment coming out of the next biennial budget, you'll have room in the levy to absorb whatever that potential ask is. Okay? So we showed, this is 27 spring, So it'd be part of your 26-27 budget. And then the next one is a 28 spring hypothetical. And again, in this case, you have about $1.3 million for the prepayment. And it just shortens the drop point another year and a half or so. The savings there is less because you're starting to run out of debt to shorten that repayment period. Okay? So ultimately, the punchline of those 3 steps, if they lay out that way over the next 3 years, is that following page, which is the Fund 39 levy and future levy capacity. And so it shows how your existing levy is, for debt repayment was 4.5 in this year's budget. It's stepping down to 3.5 as a plan for the next 2. And then it would step down to a little over 2.5 in that final year, 28-29, and then it would be 0 thereafter. So that step down is what we could, as you are making board decisions and pre-planning for what's next, and we're learning what the next biennial budget is and what it will do to your local factors, this would be an area where we can, strategize around how do you best put that capacity to work.
Do we have that number in terms of the mill rate difference roughly? Because this is a dollar amount on the total tax levy, right?
You mean like the capacity that would free up at the end?
Yeah, well, in terms of what that current 4.5 million going down to 0 over 4 years, what that,
It's, if I remember right, Gabe, it's a little over $2 and maybe $2.25 is what the current debt level impacts the levy.
and then, yeah.
Because I think without the debt, the mill rate would be right around 4.
Okay, thanks.
And I will stand corrected if that's not right.
I'm working on it.
But to Brian's point there on that last, and this is the stuff I think about at night. Really exciting life.
Yeah, you're cool.
But the timing really is pretty impeccable, and that's not to say that, a debt issue would have to occur in 2028, but when we start looking at the preliminary budget projections, and we start looking at the fund balance, and again, there's so much that we don't know with what's going to happen at the state level, but really the good news is that, there's so many districts that are up against the wall. Their levy is already, at a point where it's a pinch point for local taxpayers. Their long-term debt is not in this situation, and they're at the max with their local budget. Whereas we look at ours, because our fund balance the way it is, we know that with our current budget projection, the real difficult part doesn't come until 2028. And even at that point, to Rachel's question before, it doesn't mean that the door is shut in 2028. It just means that having enough cash flow in our fund balance in order to handle all the cash throughout the year, after 2028, it's looking like either short-term borrowing or a line of credit would be needed. Well, we were in that situation just like 8-9 years ago. So it's not like that's the end of the world. But the great thing about it is that based on how we've handled the debt and based on how Brian has put this plan together, if we execute it, we get to 2028 and there's a lot of flexibility there. And whether that means that things that normally would be paid for out of Fund 10 could end up going back into Fund 39, or whether there's some sort of operational capacity, I really think there's a lot of flexibility depending on what the board and what the community wants to do at that time. So to me, the future is very, very bright. It's a lot of work, and there's no guarantees, but we are set up right now in a great situation. And if we plan ahead and execute, what Brian was talking about, we'll be in really good shape. So Brian and Eric, is there anything else you guys wanted to share?
Yes. So I wanted to say you were close. So I think what your final statement was is without it would be 4 something as the mill rate. You were 560 as a total mill rate. That 4.5 million divided by your 3.3 billion of total property value within the school district boundaries equates to $1.34. So it's about 4.26 would be, so out of the 560. So saying it differently to Abe's question, the $4.5 million equates to about $1.34 of this year's levy. Back to your question about your reinforcement of the fact it gets aided. You are positively aided at all 3 tiers, and because of the low spending status of the district, you actually don't spend into the 3rd tier. So, like, if we don't use it and pay down the debt, you're losing aid that would otherwise come into the debt to the district. So you're actually, the statewide pot of aid is helping to pay this debt down as well. So it's part of the overall strategy of it, paying it down, saving interest costs, but also bringing aid that wouldn't have otherwise been there if you didn't spend it, because you can't spend beyond that low spending ceiling, right, low revenue ceiling. So it all fits together to a plan that Joe and Leah and Eric and the prior boards have all set up over lots of years of planning and thinking about it late at night. So I think my last page was just the future election cycle. Just to have that as a reference, again, as, when and if needed, but it just shows you lead time for decisions leading up to putting a question on a ballot in the future. And really, I mean, if we follow this next 3 springs worth of payments, your latest time period to ask would be spring of 29, but I prefer that you think about it in spring of, or somewhere in 28, to give yourself time to think about what those plans are before you hit the drop point. You can go beyond the drop point, that's fine. It's just the levy that you've been paying down to debt will go away, the aid will go back. It'll actually go down because your expenditure goes down. So you actually it's not a full benefit of that $1.34. And then, you'll have a lower base that you're then at some point in the future talking about.
So we talk all the time about really trying to maximize the state investment in our school district, and the board has done a really good job with year-end budget transfers to help us capture as much state aid as possible. And this kind of goes along those lines. If we can spend $1 in Menomonie and get whatever it is, $1.50 out of that dollar from the state back, it's a real wise investment as long as the dollar is available. And I realize it's not always available to do that. There certainly are limitations. But I would just hate to see us, if it's a conscious choice, fine. The community doesn't want to do it, the board doesn't want to do it, fine. But what I don't want to happen is us get to that point and be like, oh, if we just would have started planning in 2026, but by now we can make a conscious choice, and if we want to maximize, how we get dollars from all across the state to come to Menomonie and really provide our kids and our community with the school operations and facilities and such that we want, great. And by planning ahead, we should have that opportunity. Because when we went to referendum a couple of years ago, and it didn't pass, obviously, well, we really cut a lot out. I mean, when we start talking about multi-million dollars of capital maintenance funding, getting rid of technology coaches, eliminating the French program, and then cutting all sorts of budget contingencies in case gas prices go up or unexpected things happen. We're not going to be able to do that again. And I think our community told us at the time that that's what they wanted us to do. It will be painful if we get to that point again.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that strikes me about this timeline is that how well it lines up with the Fund 46 depletion, and that we will be at a time when there is maintenance and updates and real, hard materials needed to keep things running, because that's exactly when our Fund 46 runway is going to run out. So it is striking how well those 2 timelines line up, and it's actually kind of encouraging that there might be a way through that. Obviously, you can't bet on anything, but and from the perspective of the taxpayer, I think that one of the big complaints in 2024 was that it wasn't really clear what the referendum was for in a very pinpoint specific way. Whereas I think taxpayers have a lot more understanding and what's the right word? Taxpayers, I think, understand the need to keep roofs on buildings and make sure that our facilities are operating and not falling apart. And the combination of those two seems to line up pretty well.
To that end, would the timing be right to take a look at the 30-year capital improvement plan and start thinking about what are the projects that we know are coming down the road that will be unsupported at the current level of contributions?
Yeah, I think that's one way to do it, and I think that should be done. And certainly, you know, Kevin's done a really good job reporting to the board every January. But again, so many of the projects were done after the 2013 referendum, and a lot of those major projects have similar lifespans. You know, roofs, boilers, you know, a lot of that stuff it's about 20 years, give or take. So yeah, I think we are going to have to look at that list. The other thing is that I do think it would make sense in the near future to actually have a facility study completed. The 30-year capital improvement plan is terrific, but having someone come in and go a little deeper than the 30-year plan and also identify what needs maybe we currently aren't meeting or what needs are coming that we would not be able to meet. I mean, education and society continues to change. You know, just think how AI and other things have impacted our community or are starting to impact our community. When you compare the 2013 referendum, now we're in 2026, and really we need to be thinking about probably 2036 and 2046, because when we start looking at these issues, I mean, these are what, a lot of times like 20-year issues, so we really need to look out a ways.
Was there a facility study done before the 2013 referendum?
Yes. I was not here, but I know Mr. Betcher was. Mr. Betcher, do you remember the facility study?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Is that still on file somewhere, do you think?
I'm sure somewhere.
I guess that, you know, we're talking about potential 2028, it sounds like, capital referendum is sort of like the undertone of what's being discussed here. Maybe I'm wrong. I guess that's going to be my question. Like when we're looking at this long-term debt and the sort of drop off that happens after 2030, yeah, I guess what would your sort of recommendation be to a school district or to a school board for considering, you know, having just heard our budget?
Yep.
That's why I use the word levy capacity, because I don't know the exact way you would want or need to utilize the levy at that point. What I do know is that to capture any of that capacity, it's going to be voter approved. So it can either be an operational for some amount, it could be capital for some amount, or it could be a hybrid of the two. Right? But either way, to unlock this amount that you're paying down and shortening the amortization of the previous rate, saving taxpayer dollars, the only way to access it in the future is going to be a vote of some sort. And so that's kind of what I was trying to get you to. There's $4.5 million down to zero at some point, and how that looks will change. But give us a couple of years to plan for what needs to be done for you to know the answer to how do we want to use that capacity, right?
Are there next steps coming out of this discussion that we want to plan for right now?
I think logically, it'll be the blink of an eye and the board will be working on the work plan, the goals that we'll be setting for the 2026-2027 school year. And I would think that a facility study would be very appropriate. I would think continued budget analysis would be very appropriate, and maybe a specific goal related to projecting out district finances and needs during the 2026-2027 school year, with the idea that that would give the board something to work towards, and then have some real data for making decisions in the, early 2027 in preparation for something potentially in 2028.
Does a facility study typically involve any, community input?
Yes, and we could have someone come in, there's multiple ways to have a facility study done, and we could have people come in and talk about those ways and what could or could not be included. But generally, yes, facility studies include input from the community, from staff, certainly from the board and administration, and in some cases, students and others.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that might be something we would start discussing later this spring in terms of getting someone in to talk about the potential. All right. Other questions for, Mr. Brewer? Or a discussion on the debt levy management? What?
Not a question, but I really appreciate you going through each slide. It was very easy to understand, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. A lot of practice.
Yeah, I agree.
I tried to not have you look at the number, but look at the columns what changes after each slide. So, thank you.
Yes, that was very well done. And thanks for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Are we ready to move on? Next up, we have a discussion on the report on Menomonie's near-site clinic.
Terrific. So we're going to shift from talking about long-term debt to something that's a little more right now, immediate. And as the board knows, one of the ways that we handled the financial pressures that we were experiencing after the referendum failed was we made major changes to the district health insurance plan. It was not easy, and it was a pretty big lift for our staff, changing and then moving to high deductibles and really a lot more exposure for all district employees. The great news is that the changes that we made have been very, very effective. They've really stabilized our health insurance costs, and again, where many districts right now are looking at real high double-digit increases. Our premiums are projected to stay the same over the next 12 months. Along with that, though, it was very important that we considered the challenges that we were having with access to healthcare. You're all aware that in the Chippewa Valley, access has become much more difficult. The closure of a healthcare facility just added to that. So one thing that we've done is we've added a near-site clinic this year. And Samantha White, our HR director, also Eric, the business manager, have been really instrumental in that, along with our partners from Novia. So Sam, I don't know if maybe you want to introduce Jake, and then Jake can kind of tell us a little bit about how that near-site clinic has been going.
Sounds great. So we have Jake Green with us tonight, and Jake, he can tell you a little bit more about his position at Anovia, but Anovia was one of three competitors for our near-site clinic, and we felt really comfortable with what they were going to provide, and this report just kind of reinforces that decision. So I will turn it over to Jake, and he can share with you some of the data and the great things that are happening with Anovia.
Thank you, Samantha. Good evening, board members and district administration. My name is Jake Graham. I am Vice President of Strategic Growth with Anovia Health. I want to start out by saying thank you. Obviously, it's a big investment and a lot of change to the health plan that you guys made over the last year. Kudos to you for being forward-thinking to make some significant changes. It's been a great partnership for us. We're super excited to be over here in Menomonie practicing. We do have the near-site clinic that is open 5 days a week. We're staffing it today with a physician that is on-site, a 0.4 FTE. We have a 1.0 FTE nurse practitioner as well as a registered nurse. So I'm really excited about the partnership we've had thus far, and we look forward to continuing to grow the clinic here in Menomonie with other, hopefully eventually business partners that can join as well as other expansions over here into the Western market. So to start out, I guess, we'll dive into the reports that I think you have in your slide deck as well. Utilization. So if you scroll to the second page, I believe second or third page, that says Inovia Health Utilization Report at the top. When we look at our strategies and our pricing strategies, so our per member per month pricing strategy. So what that means is everybody that is enrolled in your health plan is charged to the district a subscription that supports unlimited visits and procedures, and then we pass through our labs and imaging at our wholesale prices. So when we look at an ROI is really measured in, one, are we improving access for your team members for good health care? Two is quality. Are they getting top-notch quality care that they otherwise wouldn't be getting? And the big one is how it affects the budget, right? Because we want to make sure that as we look at the services we're providing, we are saving some money when we compare to the other options that are here in the community. So ROI is really a byproduct of utilization. When we bring a partner on, it's really important for us to make sure our partners understand who we are, how we work, and that your employees understand how to use us and the impacts that it can have on future renewal rates as well as the care that they can receive. So when we bring a new group on, what we really budget and estimate is 33% unique patient engagement. And of that 33% unique patient engagement, we expect to see 2.5 care episodes per person. So that's how we set our benchmarks. But if we look at the top, we have member utilization over the last 12 months at 29%, which is phenomenal. That's a great start because if our annualized goal is 33%, we're already at 29%. That's a testament to the work that's gone into this so far, right? Making sure people understand who we are and how to use us.
Because Jake, it's been open since August, right?
It's been open since August, right? And I'll get into that when we try to look at the big picture on using us to the full capacity. Because what that means is since August, you're right, we've had 201 people engage with us from the school district for primary care or acute needs. As we go on the right side, we have visits because we want to be able to capture from a full ROI standpoint. We want people to use us for acute care, right? So that's the strep throats, ear infections, UTIs, and things like that. But the real expense comes into play when we're talking about chronic disease management, early intervention for chronic conditions, preventative exams, so we can catch things early before it turns into something that would be catastrophic, really, from multiple angles. So if we look at the visits over the last 12 months, our benchmark was 238, and we came in at 279 from providers alone. 323 to the right of that is actually going to be nursing visits and other things that are sprinkled in. We do separate out nursing visits from provider visits from a utilization standpoint because we don't want things like biometrics or pre-employment screenings or fasting blood work, things like that to factor into utilization. Below that, provider visits by month. This is going to be really neat when we're partners longer because we'll be able to identify those trends. So we look at busy times of the year. Right now we're in one. We have a lot of people that are sick with flus and things like that. But typically we do see a significant spike in Q4 of the year and Q1. And then over the summer months it starts to trend down, and that's just because it's summer, right? It's nicer weather, people aren't as ill and they're traveling and things like that. Below that, we have it broken up by quarter, so again, that'll feed into seeing the trends. Now, from an executive leadership team standpoint at Inovia, we take these numbers very seriously, and this is how we look at it across all of our 17 locations. So we have 13 clinics like we have in Menomonie, and we have 4 on-site with some of our larger, more aggressive employers. But we take this very seriously because we guarantee same-day and following-day access for all of our clinics. Because again, if you're investing into this for your members to utilize, they darn well better be able to get in to be seen, right? So we staff up, we bring on providers. As I'm out in the markets looking for new employer partners come into our clinic, we make sure we're ahead of that trend and game so that we are staffed up and prepared for it when they do go live. Now the bottom left is unique members by number of visits. So this is really neat as well. As we look at it, keep in mind we've been a partner since August, right? So I wouldn't expect a lot of people to have multiple visits at this point. But really, it's a pretty good trend, right? We've seen 141 of the 201 people came in one time, and that was one time alone. Now, we don't know at this point, was that one time a preventative exam? Was it acute needs? Some of that will be broken out as we get further along in the report based on CPT code. But we did have 44 people engaged 2 to 3 times, 13 engaged 4 to 6 times, and 3 actually engaged 7 to 9 times. So what that could be is someone that has a blood pressure medication that just needs to get in until we can make sure we get the dosing right. Or maybe they were recently diagnosed with a new chronic condition and we need to just monitor blood work frequently. The model that we have here and that you added for your members is unlimited access, right? And from a billing standpoint for them, the most they're going to pay for that visit is $10. If it's a non-preventative visit, they're paying us $10 copay today, which we're taking off the backside from the invoice. If it's a preventative exam with unlimited labs, they're not paying anything. So it's a pretty awesome benefit that's added, not only from a savings from a health plan perspective, but also just hiring and retention perspective. Now, on the right side, visits by clinic, I'm excited to have some more color added to the pie chart, and that is as we expand in the Western market. As we look in central Wisconsin, where Adobe has a number of different clinics, it's all different colors because we want people to have access at multiple locations. Opportunities for your group really is, you have members that have students in college or something like that. Hopefully they went to Stout, but if they went to Stevens Point or to Oshkosh, any of those locations, we have clinics there as well, which is just additional access. I want to pause for a second before I move into ROI. Are there any questions on utilization? Okay. All right, so if we can scroll down to the next one, which is the fun stuff, right? So what is the utilization is great, what is the result of that? So Samantha, elbow me if I go too far into the weeds here, but I want to try to make sure people understand the billing structure and how we look at things here. So our providers do drop codes in a similar way that providers do in a health system. So keep in mind, myself included, 90% of our team are from health systems, and we left those health systems because we just wanted to provide care in a different way, right? We wanted to spend more time with patients. We want to remove those middle layers that come into play when we're billing insurance. We want direct-to-employer contracts so our providers can focus on the patients rather than productivity metrics and revenue and profits in that way. So in the left column under Innovia, you see the total that the school district has paid us over the last 6 months. August, so yeah, about 6 months. And when we look at to the right, there's 3 buckets. So we have conservative, moderate, and aggressive. So we use healthcare pricing transparency tools to look up those CPT codes that our providers are dropping. Remember, we're only doing that to track data to show our ROI. When we do that, we're comparing 3 different buckets. We're comparing build rates, which build rates are the highest rate that the hospital systems would bill for that CPT code. And we are comparing cash rates, which traditionally are the lowest rate, and then a contracted rate is going to fall somewhere in between. And then we also added a 3rd bucket, which you don't have to look too far into today, and that's reference-based pricing, which is a percentage of Medicare that some of our employers are starting to dabble with, but we're not seeing a ton of success because hospital systems are tending to bill the patient the remaining balance rather than what the employers are paying. So in a conservative column, we're comparing our costs code for code as our providers drop them. Now, the conservative is code for code. The moderate has a modifier in place, and that modifier is 1.5 times, and I'll get to the why. And the aggressive bucket has a 2 times modifier in place. Now, the modifiers are there to really compare apples to apples because healthcare billing is a complex beast in itself. There's a lot of layers that go into it. One being what are the contracted rates, so it's somewhere between that cash rate and that build rate. 2 being productivity coding incentives. So if you look at the compensation structure for providers in a traditional healthcare system where I was a part of, the more money you bill, the more money you make. So it's based on revenue and time by codes. And there's a rev cycle layer that comes into play, and I was talking about this with Samantha last time I was here. A report that used to come across my desk that was provider 1, build out a 99212 CPT code, but as we look at the charting notes and the duration of time they spend with the patient, we can justify an increased charge to a 99213, which maximizes production and revenue. So if we're going to compare apples to apples, and our providers are paid a flat rate salary, and it's my job to get out and find clients that can come to them, patients that can come to them, and our success team's job to make sure those clients understand the value and how to utilize us. Our providers are a lot more conservative in their billing. So we're not maximizing production from a coding standpoint, and we are running it against our cash rates. So the most conservative level that we look at on the right side, I want to point out the labs. So our per member per month strategy is $39.75 per member per month, labs and imaging pass-through at wholesale. In just 6 months alone, the district paid us $4,251, but if we compare to the conservative number to the right of that, those same labs in a system from a cash price would have cost $28,339. So that's significant savings just through an ancillary opportunity that we have in our clinic rather than looking at all the visits. As we go down, we have avoided urgent care and ER visits. We use national studies to support this data because ultimately it's hard for us to know exactly where that patient would have ended up if they didn't come to us. Would they have tried to get in with their primary care provider? Would they have gone to urgent care? Would they have gone to an ER? So it's hard to know exactly what that cost would have been. So for the avoided urgent care and ER visits, we use the Menomonie Society of Actuaries study that found employees with access to a DPC had 41% fewer ER visits than those that didn't. And then we justify the dollars on the bottom. Moderate is 50% of primary care spend, aggressive 75%, and conservative is 25% of that. That's to capture some value without knowing, again, what that actual objective data is going to support. And the other really big one here with our model, having the highest level of primary care providers with physicians and physician assistants and the duration of time that they need to spend with the patients, is we avoid significant unnecessary referrals to specialties. So an example that I'll use here is, it wasn't in Menomonie, it was in our Weston clinic. We had a patient that came in with a mole that was discolored or was hurting or there was something wrong with it. In a traditional primary care setting where that visit would be 7 to 9 minutes on average, that referral is going to go to dermatology, right? They'll say, all right, I see you have this mole, something wrong, let's get you out to derm so they can take a look at it. Since we had a physician that was able to handle it that day and gave them the time to do it, they were able to remove the mole and they sent it off to pathology themselves to see if there was any concerns or red flags prior to sending that referral. So we removed it that day, sent it off to path, and got the results back in a week, and there were no concerns. So now we avoided what would have been in central Wisconsin a 3 to 6 month wait to get into a specialist for that patient, right? Which is a lot of anxiety when you have something going on. Minimum $1,000 in a bill just to get in with that specialist, and if the deductibles and max out of pockets are met, it'd be significantly more. So that's where we're able to provide significant value by giving our providers time to take care of things, to look into things, to find a root cause of what might be going on, and just helping them be, members become smart consumers of healthcare and know how to navigate things. So all of the numbers here, total up at the bottom, conservative, moderate, aggressive, and all of that's going to be captured on the next page as we look into what the CPT codes our providers dropped, the volume of CPT codes, and what the cost would have been between the system bill rates and the system cash rates. I don't know, open it up for questions again. I know there's a lot to digest there as far as the numbers go.
If I could just point out, and I think maybe the headline got buried a little bit, just because there's so much information, it's so important, but I really like that first page where it talks about $228,000 of savings. I mean, it's just terrific. 29% utilization, 201 unique patients seen, 60 plus with 2 visits. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so not only has this been a good financial investment for the school district, but it's provided our employees with so much better access, avoiding so many of those anxiety issues of having to wait to get in and to see someone. It's been terrific. So any questions, board members?
You mentioned, how this is one of your first locations in Northern Wisconsin, and, as other employers sign on to similar plans. So we know that the SDMA employees are making great utilization of this clinic. How do you feel like the capacity of that clinic is from the service perspective if, a couple other large employers sign on?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is something that we actually look at every single week. We look at volumes from the previous month as well as the previous year, because we want to be able to identify the trends to know what to expect. So we don't want our providers seeing on average more than 12 patients in a day, and at the very max 15 patients in a day, because it's not only access, but it's quality. So to get people in, we don't want to shorten up the visit times. We don't want to turn into what we all left, essentially. So it's a great point, Abe, and something we looked at. I'll give the example at Stevens Point. We brought on the school district in Stevens Point about a year ago, and our clinic at that point was running with provider oversight. It was actually about the same size as what our Menomonie clinic is today. And when we brought on the school district and knew we were going to have a contract coming to fruition, we actually staffed up. So we doubled the size of the clinic, we expanded it, and we added 2 providers and 2 nurses to support the volume. So we take it very serious to make sure we can staff up and we have the space to expand. Now, if you've been in our clinic here in Menomonie, we actually do have the room to expand and add another exam room, so that's something we look at when we build out our clinics. But we have a full-time recruiter on our team that is meeting with providers in all of our different areas to what we call build our bench. So when I'm out doing my job and I bring on other employers that want to join the clinic, we're prepared and we have people that are lined up and ready to go live with us. So we try to stay ahead of that.
Thanks.
And these numbers are great. Is there a way that you are collecting more qualitative data about the experiences people are having?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So we do surveys. We do surveys for patients and we do surveys for employers. So we can look at it through both lenses. We also do quality metrics just internally with our providers. So we do the chart review process to make sure that we're capturing what we need to capture in the right way. We actually started to integrate some AI stuff in there as well, so we can just make sure that we're to the top-notch quality care that we can be. But other than the surveys that we usually do on an annual basis, it's more just employee testimonies, getting in front of the groups, meeting with the employers. Our client success team meets with our employer groups every quarter, so we can address anything that's going well, maybe things that aren't going well, as well as make sure they have all the educational material they need to be successful.
And I just want to comment on that really quickly too. We have had a lot of amazing feedback from our staff who have had experiences at Innovia, and we encourage them to let us know when things are going well or if they encounter some sort of an issue. And we deal with any issues right away, early on, just like anything new. You know, we had a couple bumps in the road. Jake and his team were incredibly responsive, got things figured out, and communication was extremely high. And we felt really comfortable with right from the beginning, and then we just continue to kind of pile on all of the positives that we hear from our staff. So I believe our staff are very happy, and I believe that they would let us know if they were not happy.
That's really great to hear, thank you. Any other questions or discussion on the Innovia and your site clinic report? All right, I'm gonna move us along. Next up, we are reviewing our contracts for CISA 10 and CISA 11 shared service for 26-27.
Okay, this one's much easier. Board members, the contracts are there for you to review. We don't utilize CISA 10 and CISA 11 very much just because of the size of our district, and a lot of the services they provide, we provide in-house through our directors and other team members. But you can see there the contracts that are being looked at for next year, and we'll bring this back to you for your consideration at the next meeting. If there's any questions, the directors can answer them. Otherwise, I think that's good.
Is there like a TLDR of what changes we're looking at from previous years? Or if any?
I think in the contract, or directors, do you want to maybe comment on any changes to the services you guys are looking at?
There are a couple changes for me. One, we had some contract days for a school psychologist this year based on the medical leave. We don't anticipate that we will need that next year, so that's a change there. And then we utilize a consultation day this year at the beginning of the school year for an in-service. I don't anticipate us doing that, but that is a service that can be added on later if we are needing, it was more of a kind of a professional development consultation day. So those are the two things that we're taking off for CISA 10 that we're not going to be this year, so next year.
Any other changes to mention?
Minor change, the high school science department had used Moodle in the past through CISA 11. They're no longer offering that service, so we're looking for an alternative solution for that one.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or discussion on these contracts? Fairly straightforward. Okay. All right. Extracurricular staff contract requests. If there's no questions about this informational item, and then I'll move us right along. I guess this is awkward, but just briefly, items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. Maybe I should have done that differently. Coming up next week, there's a public school funding forum at 6 p.m. at the Ellie Phillips Memorial Library in Eau Claire. I will be on the panel if anyone wants to come see. Our regular school board meeting is March 9th. School will be closed for spring break, March 16th through 20th. Special school board meeting March 23rd. The CISA 11 Joint Board TAC event is on April 1st, time TBD, but that's in Turtle Lake, right? Should folks check in with Jenny if they'd like to attend?
Yes.
And I'm going to leave it at that. All right, moving back up to our action agenda. And our first item here is an action to approve 2025-26 staffing plan adjustments. I'll entertain a motion to approve the staffing plan adjustments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, motion by Michelle, second by Angie, thank you. And do you want to go ahead? I know we've been keeping Stacy leaving all day.
I appreciate Stacy being here. You can come up, Stacy, in case there's any questions. I don't know if there will be any, but yeah, so 2 staffing plan adjustments. Again, this is for the current school year. First of all, here at the Administrative Service Center, we do have a resignation that is taking place. And anytime we have a resignation, we take a look at if there's ways to streamline things, and we do think there is a way to streamline things. There's been a lot of communication here with the different departments at ASC, so we are looking to absorb that position and make that change. Also, with the school nutrition program, you saw a proposal from Stacy Nelson, same type of deal. You know, as we look at enrollment changes, and that's kind of what we were talking about the preliminary budget. You know, that has cast forward staffing, but you know, we continue to evaluate the 2 changes that we're asking the board to consider. We're at approximately $44,000 of savings for the rest of the 2025-2026 school year. Any questions at all?
I just wanted to say I really appreciate the detail and thought that you put into this the staffing change proposal for the school nutrition department, as well as the AAC. But this is great. This is incredible. So, and it all makes tons of sense to me, and I really appreciate how they laid that all out. All right. Any questions for Stacy or about the ASC change before we vote? We can just vote. Dominique said. Okay, great. Dominique has provided a voice vote. So let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. Thanks. All right, next up we have an action to approve the 2026-27 MHS course recommendations. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Dave.
Second?
Motion by Abe, second by Amber. Looks like we have a slight update from last time that one of the courses proposed to run with under 15 students was removed.
Yes, the board reviewed this last time, and Brian, could you just cover the update, please?
Yep, so the only change from last time, there were 2 courses last time that were being requested in the math department, AP Calculus, and then the music theater department, advanced theater. Since that time through the reload process, the AP Calculus class has enrollments that have climbed above that threshold of 15. So it's removed from the list, not because it's not being run, but because it no longer requires board approval. But other than that, everything else is the same.
Any questions or discussion on the, did you raise your hand? No. Okay, any questions or discussion on the course recommendations? All right, let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. All right, next on to action item C, to approve the compensation plan for 2026-27. Looking for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the compensation package, proposal B, which includes a CPI cost of living increase of 2.63% and pay for earned steps, lanes, and performance.
Second.
Right, motion by Dale, second by Dave. Discussion?
I just want to point out that, this was discussed at length by the board at the last meeting. Per the direction of the board, we prepared 2 proposals, and it's been all there for you to review.
And I really appreciate the detail and the thoughtful commentary on both the budget impact and the meeting to the staff. So, yeah, I think it's, I'm glad Dale proposed this, and I think that it of all the things we can spend money on the district, making sure we maintain excellent staff and keep them in a good position is among the most important things you can do.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and also with just the appreciation. I realized that putting together 2 proposals was double the work, so thank you for doing that. And it really does help to see it all spelled out like that. Other questions or discussion?
Michelle, do you have any commentary or questions?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, is this the one that you recommended, or you wanted to go lower?
I was concerned with the cost of the proposal B, which is what's being proposed. But like we talked about with the preliminary budget, there are so many things that we don't know. I do agree with the importance of compensating our staff. I'm very proud of the work that our staff has done. Our school report cards are up. The relationships that we have with kids are terrific. Our staff are working very hard. So I support the board's decision.
Yes, I saw that they would decide, but it was up to the board. So, but I just wanted to just bring that up because I was a little concerned that we might go that way, and we didn't. So I'm pleased with that piece. Thank you.
I also think, as we've discussed tonight, it does seem fairly clear that when we look at the projected budget deficit, that really is like a worst-case scenario. And there's a lot of reasons to think that we could end up with a 2026-27 budget that is closer to balanced.
Hopefully that's the case. I did want to express, that choices like this do put increasing pressure on Joe here. And so, I just want to express that part of this is faith and trust in your ability to make really clear and well thought out decisions long term. And so this is going to make some decisions more complicated in the future for sure. But tight budgets are tight budgets. But I hope you can interpret this as a expression of faith.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's absolutely true that, to the extent that we have right now a healthy fund balance and a healthy fiscal position going into an uncertain future, that investing in our people is the absolutely most important thing we can do. Go ahead, sorry.
I'm really glad that we're going to maybe go this way. Of course, we haven't voted yet, but just to let you know, I was in the schools a little bit this week because I went and voluntarily read to some Head Start kids, and somebody that was on staff here told me that she was very excited and appreciated the fact that we were thinking that way. And then I was at River Heights, they had a children's program, or I think it was grades 2 and 3, had a music program, and the teachers also that were there came up to me and said the same thing. This is a real raise. So I just thought that was something to note. Thank you.
And I would just add that, before making this motion, and even when I was thinking about it months ago, I really and sensitive about the financial part of it. I really appreciate, Eric, the work that you've put into this to help us compare. But I just think the time is right. I think that now it's very important. I think there's a lot of increases in costs for our administration, for our staff, and I think now is an important time. I had similar feedback as what Amy just expressed, and I look at the reports that we get from our elementary, middle school, and high school every week, and I see great things going on, and I think this compensation package will encourage them to keep doing that and do more.
Any additional questions or discussion? All right, let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. All right, final action item, an action agenda item for tonight. An action to approve voucher transparency resolution as presented. Do we have a motion?
Hines moves.
Amy seconds.
Great. So we have I'm sorry, I don't have the right tab open. We have our voucher transparency resolution that was drafted at the last school board meeting. If you'll all bear with me, I was going to maybe read the whole thing aloud. Any objections? All right. So a resolution in support of full transparency for taxpayers of state-mandated school funding. Whereas the Board of Education, administration, educators, staff, parents, and community members of the school district of the Menomonie area are best served when there is full transparency regarding school funding. And whereas the state of Wisconsin reduces state aid from the school district of the Menomonie area for students who live in the attendance area but who choose to attend private voucher schools separate from the SDMA. And whereas the Board of Education has the authority to levy for the reduced amount of state aid for private voucher school payments. And whereas the Wisconsin legislature has increased per pupil payments for vouchers by 34.6% for grades K through 8, 52.5% for grades 9 through 12, 26% for special education, and 38.1% for independent charter schools since the 2022-23 school year. And whereas the cost of private voucher school payments in SDMA is up $404,119, or 41.2% from the 2024-25 school year, for a total cost of $1.38 million, and the school district of the Menomonie area is therefore levying $1.38 million for the 2025-26 school year to make up for this loss of state aid withheld for private school vouchers. And whereas the Wisconsin legislature voted to inform Wisconsin property taxpayers regarding the amount each school district levies for voter-approved referenda necessitated by the loss of state aid diverted for private voucher, special education, and independent charter school payments, as well as by an overall lack of state funding for public education by the Wisconsin legislature by including that information on property tax bills. And whereas the Board of Education strongly advocates and supports transparency in all respects regarding taxpayer dollars, therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the School District of the Menomonie area requests the City of Menomonie and surrounding municipalities in the district's attendance area to include annually on their property tax bills the amount of the School District of the Menomonie area tax levy that is for the purpose of capturing state aid that is reduced, diverted, and lost from the public school district of the Menomonie area to fund private voucher, special education, and independent charter school payments incurred at the sole expense of the public school district of the Menomonie area. Maybe didn't realize how long that was. Do we have any questions or discussion on this resolution?
Once we vote on it, what's the next step?
Great question.
Would you like us to put a discussion item at the next agenda to plan out?
Yeah, okay, we can do that. So there would be a discussion item on March 9th to make a decision about where to send it first? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or how it would be delivered, or who volunteers to do that,
Okay, okay.
or who gets directed to do it, depending on how the board wants to go
And
forward.
that timeline can be fairly flexible as well, right? In the sense that even to get it on the next property bill, those are printed, I think, in early December.
Mhm.
So we don't have to sprint, and we want to, if something we move forward, we want to move forward deliberately, but we don't have to sprint to get it done in a month or anything like that. It's going to be a process of discussion and outreach.
Yeah, I think by taking this on in February, we're setting ourselves up well, that we're not trying to, like you said, to sprint or to have to really rush into that decision. So that makes a lot of sense. Oh, go ahead.
I agree about the sprint, but I think we also need to remember that it could take some time because we know that Green Bay had a couple of times that just before they were able to get the city council on board. So I don't anticipate that happening here, but you just never know.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So we'll discuss on March 9th and make a plan for that.
Michelle, do you have any questions or comments?
I cannot, thanks.
Okay. Any additional questions or discussion? All right, let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. All right. That's it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, stand adjourned. Board members, should we do a group picture with our for public school?
Do we have to sign that document?